I don't know what the hell about this shirt fascinates everybody, but everybody loves to comment on this crazy shirt that I got. I have no idea why. It's a polo shirt. It was radically expensive. I don't know why I bought it. I just thought it looked cool. There's a theme, a thread, if you will, that runs on all the videos I make on field theory specifically. And it's rational, and it's logical, and it's not based on atomism. As I've said before many times, there's only ever been two postulates for the foundation. You know, like the foundation that a house is built upon, two foundations for ultimate reality throughout all of history. Only ever been two. One has been atomistic, yeah, completely irrational, rejected countless times, and completely impossible. And the other one is the ether, yeah? And it's about fields. And of course, a field is just an ether perturbation modality, kind of like ice, water, and steam are just different temperature and pressure modalities of water. Can't explain the universe with atomism and so-called discrete particles, photons, electrons. Now, I've never, ever denied nuclear particles. There is, of course, a fundamental atomic nuclear particle. The rejection of atomism is not the rejection of a fundamental nuclear particle. As Tesla, Maxwell, Steinmetz, and Heaviside said, the gods of field theory, way more intelligent than you are, or collectively any of you, no offense, they all said the same thing. There's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. The so-called inventor, not the inventor, excuse me, the discoverer of the concept of the electron, J.J. Thomson, said, the electron is a unit of dielectric induction. Completely accurate. It's not a particle at all. I said inventor. Invented the electron. I meant to say the discoverer. But the one thing that runs through the theme of attack by the atomists and all the field theory videos that I made, and there's a wave of them recently, is the use of the word wave. And everybody's so ingrained. There's two fundamental things that every one of us, including me, have been brainwashed on or about since birth. One of them is light is an emission, light has a speed, and light is a particle. A particle is a photon. And our light is a wave-particle duality. Well, first off, Mother Nature doesn't deal in dualities. Duality implying inherent contradiction. There are no dualities in nature. It's completely impossible. It's even conceptually impossible. The notion of a photon is an arbitrary concept with no basis in reality. But the one thing that people keep using in their attack against the field theory videos that I make is that they will conceptualize the word wave. So-and-so cosmic waves, waves that people just like light. And human beings would actually have a very, very close understanding to Mother Nature if they would stop reifying. Here's a great word, reification, which of course is a fallacy. Reifying light and reifying the concept of a wave. There is no such thing as a wave. Waves do not exist because waves are not principles, or what we would say in the vernacular, things. There's no such things as waves. Waves are what things do, not what things are. So they keep using these abstract concepts like waves and energy and lines of force, even to a great extent gravity. The phenomena of gravity, of course, is not deniable. But to think that there is a particle interaction between this and acceleration towards the Earth, or actually the Earth is also too accelerating towards the rock, but since it's basically nil, the rock is accelerating towards the Earth. But that's also too incorrect, as I've explained many times. Things are not accelerating towards one another. They're accelerating towards a null tension point, a nodal null tension point between the two, i.e. the lowest pressure mediation between the two. This is also too readily visible underneath the supercell when magnets are accelerating towards one another. Now we call them magnets, but the reason for the acceleration is dielectric acceleration. There's no such thing as magnetic attraction because magnetism, by definition, is a centrifugal force and motion vector, i.e. the three-dimensional S-curve, the centrifugal divergence of the loss of energy or inertia a fundamental three-dimensional S-curve. You just bend a piece of wire like an S, and then take each end and twist it inverse to one another, the extrapolation of which, of course, is toroidal. That is magnetism. Magnetism is just the dielectric field. That's all that it is. There's only two fundamental fields in the universe, the dielectric and the magnetic. Electricity is the hybrid of both. Phi times psi equals Q in Planck of electrification. Yes. And gravity is an abstruse concept created by human beings. The only distinction between so-called magnetic attraction, which is not magnetism at all, it's dielectric acceleration, is one is point source, the other one is non-point source. Mutual mass acceleration. Yes? Anyway, they actually engender these concepts to prove me wrong and to prove them right, but they have no idea. You cannot get a single PhD physicist to explain what energy is. Say, excuse me, sir, what is energy? Well, there is no. They'll say, well, energy is work. Like, no, that's descriptive. Energy does work, but what is energy itself? Well, now we're getting into philosophy. You know, it's not my department. So if you don't understand what energy is, you don't understand anything about Mother Nature. They love talking about waves. They love talking about lines of force. Force is not a thing. Force is done upon something by something else. It's a concept. Force. There are no lines. The so-called lines are constructive, destructive interference between the conjugate geometry of the dielectric and the magnetic. All lines that we see, including the double slit experiment, and also, too, all the lines that we see underneath the supercell or the ferrocell, constructive and destructive interference between the conjugate geometry of the universe, respectively the dielectric and the magnetic. The people need to stop reifying Mother Nature, specifically to waves, because there are no such thing as waves. If people would actually tell themselves that before using the word waves, especially in any attack on me, it's like, well, what are you talking about waves? Waves. Waves of what? Well, energy. Energy, you can't define energy. Well, it's fields. What do you mean a field? No branch of science has ever defined the term field. Well, it's lines of force. Well, force is not a thing either. Force is what something does upon something else. There are no lines. That's a descriptive observance of phenomena. Well, it's what it is. It's energy. It's lines of force. It's waves. It's waves of energy. There's no such thing as waves, and you could never, ever define, in D notation anyway, what energy is. Well, energy is to do work. That would not be energy, that would be the dissipation of energy, because work is done, energy is released. Just like these logs are releasing their hydrocarbon energy when they're set ablaze. You know, they're doing work, they're manifesting not energy, but the dissipation, the impotency of energy. Because the energy would be the log itself, not while it's burning, but before it's being burned. That is true energy, pure potential. Actualized energy is the impotency of energy. You're releasing energy. Release of energy is not energy, it's the dissipation of energy. It's force. In this case, the force we're talking about is flames and heat, radiant heat. The force of the release of energy of the dielectric is a silly little word human beings called magnetism. Waves. Waves of what? Waves. Human beings, and we were all brainwashed with this stuff growing up. We were way, way too deep in concept reification. We have to stop that. There's no such thing as a shadow. There's no such thing as emptiness. Space is not a thing. This is the only time Nikola Tesla lost his mind and foamed at the mouth, not literally. Got close to what we would call angry. Was attacking the cult of quantum and the relativists on the notion that space has properties. You could bend space and it does things. He said that was complete farce. Space has no properties. It has attributes. A shadow has attributes too. You stand in a shadow, you're cold. But a shadow is not a thing. A shadow is a concept that we give to the absence of light, and that absence due to occlusion, by an object, due to the magnetic permeability and dielectric permittivity of whatever's blocking the light. These things don't exist. Shadows don't exist. Space has no properties and is not a thing ultimately. Time doesn't exist either. Time is only a measure. But we all have ideas of time. We spend our entire lives looking at a watch on our hand or on the wall. Time flies. Time! Most valuable thing in the world, it's time. We all burn in the sea of time. Well, time doesn't exist ultimately at all. Time is just the attribute of mass and magnitude. Specifically, it is its measure. This is the fundamental mental implosion of the lack of wisdom and intelligence of humanity in the 21st century. We have reified things that don't exist. You know, light is not a particle, and it's not a wave, and there's no such thing as waves anyway. Waves of energy! Sure there are. Well, you can't define energy, and saying waves of energy is, you know, a unicorn leprechaun abstraction. What are you trying to reify energy? Waves of energy. So what light is a wave of energy. Certain frequency, it's composed of photons. It's a wave-particle duality. Well, light's not an emission. Light's not a particle. There's no such thing as a wave. Sure there is. Electromagnetic radiation, set frequency and wavelength. Waves of what? Energy! Well, define energy for me. It's not energy, it's the impedency of energy. And it's not moving. If you're alone in a pond and you're flapping your arms, yeah? You're creating a perturbation in the medium, i.e. the pond. The waves are not propagating, they're actually going up and down like pistons. Because when this manifestation of the medium, i.e. the pond, or we would be speaking about the ether in the case of fields, goes up, it causes a pressure differential between the next group of water, which of course is all interconnected, to rise. So that waves are not traveling. Visually they are traveling. Well, waves propagate at XYZ speed. And, like, no, they're not. And that propagation speed is not a speed at all, because speed implies something is moving. We all have the idea that light is moving, but it's not. That speed is the hysteresis of the ether. Let me repeat that. Hysteresis of the ether. Look up the word hysteresis. It's the rate of induction, in other words. But I love the fact, it tickles me pink. Like when I was younger and I'd get a pralines and cream ice cream cone and it was hot outside. You'd be standing outside, stupidly looking in the street, licking your pralines and cream. I get that feeling when someone tries to attack me, and their whole basis of attack is to use a bunch of things that include the word waves. It's like, why there's no such thing as a wave? A wave of what? Waves don't exist. Sure they do. You're crazy. All that tattoo ink has been blocking your brain cells. Yeah, great. Sure it has. You tell me what a wave is. Well, it's a wave of energy. This circular reasoning cannot be enjoined. As they say, the center does not hold. The center doesn't hold. Which means it's illogical and unwise and inconsistent. It's untenable. There's another great word everybody should learn. Untenable. You use that word a lot. You'll impress people. Say, yes, your position is untenable. I'm sorry, but your logic is untenable. When I'd watch Star Trek, I'd always laugh at the Vulcans. I was like, that's your idea of logic? That's not logical at all. I'm way more logical than a so-called Vulcan is. I always laughed at the so-called logic of Vulcans when I'd watch Star Trek. And I'm not a Star Trek fan, but... we have to get these ideas out of our heads, but I don't think people will. It's too deeply ingrained in the human psyche. Light is particles and waves. And waves are the answer. Waves of what? Please get the idea of waves out of your head. Waves. It's like talking about happiness. When someone says waves, I think of happiness or sadness or something. It's like, what do you mean? Because if someone says waves to me, it's like, you talk about happiness. Like, what do you mean? I say, you just said happiness. They say, happy. Who is happy? I said, no happiness. Well, what do you mean, who is happy? See, it's the exact same thing. There's no such thing as happiness, right? Because if I said happy, I saw happiness, you would say, who is happy? I said, no, I saw happiness. Happiness is the answer. What? Who is happy? I said, no, happiness. There's no such thing as happiness. Happiness doesn't exist. Happiness is a state or condition that someone has. Yeah? Not me, but maybe somebody else that's rich or beautiful or something. They're happy. Like, oh, yeah, somebody was happy. It's like, yeah, it's the exact same thing with waves. Stop telling me about waves. You say waves, and I'm going to say happiness. That is going to be my answer from now on. If someone says waves, I'm going to say happiness. And they're going to say, who was happy? I'm going to say, exactly. And they're going to say, what? It's like, who's on first, what's on second? I'm going to say, yeah, happiness. And they're going to say, who was happy? I'm going to say, exactly. Say, waves of what? What? I said, happiness. Who was happy? Exactly! Waves of what? Who was happy? See, those are both the same thing. So I found the quickest way to circumvent this wave fallacy. Next time someone says waves, I'm going to say happiness. And they're going to say, who was happy? I'm going to say, exactly. Who was happy? What's waving? My hand is waving. Happiness. Who was happy? I was happy. You see where I'm going with this? Oh, wisdom is its own reward, let me tell you. Now this is what we call dry humor. Now you may not think this is funny, but to me it is really funny. Yeah. Have a nice weekend. Oh my God.